Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are honored to have Professor Thomas Fisher today with us. He's the director of Minnesota Design Center and Dayton Hudson Chair in Urban Design in the College of Design at the University of Minnesota, and also the director of Geospatial Communities. Professor Fisher has served for 19 years as the dean at the University of Minnesota and became the director in the Minnesota Design Center in 2015. His research is mainly focused on sustainable architecture, design ethics, and community-based services design. He has been the fifth most published writer about architecture in the US in 2005. He has written lots of books and lots of articles that I literally recommend you to look up and read. They are super interesting. We are super happy to have you. Thank you.
Good, yeah, good to be here. Good to see so many friends in the audience. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to talk about two and possibly three things because of the various things I'm involved in. The first one is the International Geodesign Collaboration, which is a collaboration of, let's see here, the slides to work. First thing to do is to make sure that there we go. A collaboration among 243 universities around the world. There's a map of them all. This is universities that use geospatial tools as a design tool. So the idea of this consortium is we're using geographic information systems to think about possible futures, run future scenarios, and then evaluate them. And this was actually going on quite a bit around the world, so we decided to form this collaboration. The first several years where all the work was gathered into this book that I co-edited with two colleagues, published by Esri Press. And what we did after the pandemic was to decide that we would all start to work on a single project as a group of universities. So everyone's continuing to do their own work, but we're also working on this Global Climate Geodesign Challenge, which is an effort to sort of bring together all of the universities into a way to assess our carbon footprints for the work that is going on in various countries. And so here's the effort that started in 2023. And it's around, we've been partnering with the Liechtenstein Institute for Strategic Development, which is actually headquartered in Berlin, as well as Esri out in California. I'm the principal investigator of it. And we've been developing a series of coefficients around climate actions. And so we have over 150 actions that you can choose from as you're making decisions. And we've developed a tool that allows you to immediately assess the impact. So you can put any kind of plan, any sort of idea that you have into what we've developed as an app for this that then will give you immediate feedback. These are unreadable on the screen, but just give you a sense of the sheer scale of the number of climate actions. And we have various countries using them. We now have a partnership with the FCC, which is part of the UN, as part of the nationally determined contributions that they have to make for COP30 in Brazil this year. What we developed is a tool that will allow them to actually spatialize their contributions. So it's one thing to say you're going to reduce your carbon footprint by 10%. The other question is where and how. And so our tool is actually the where and the how of to help them achieve this. And so we've been training. We had 70 countries sign up for training this spring, and we're beginning to gather information about what they're doing. And so just a little bit about the workflow is that we sort of look at existing data sets in terms of what we know going on in various parts of the world, from climate trace, from the IPCC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. There's a number of data sets. And then we've been developing our own climate actions directory, again, with our partners, a group of ecologists and scientists in Germany developing that with us. The way this works is that you select the appropriate climate actions that you're interested in, and you begin to map them. And so the app that we've developed, Experience Builder app, using Esri's tool, then allows you to sort of assign timelines to those various actions. And then you basically hit a run button on the app, and it comes into a server here at the University of Minnesota, run by some of Len's colleagues with an API connection to Germany. And so very quickly, we take various scenarios that you might have, we run the assessments, and so you get immediate feedback about this. I'll give you an example. We recently did this with Japan on an island at the south of Japan. They were planning on putting in one of the world's largest solar farms. But the other alternative is the ecologists were trying to get them to not do that and to basically restore the ecology of the island. Turns out when you did that, restoring the ecology had a better carbon footprint than the solar farm. So Japan decided not to put in the solar farm and is now in the process of restoring the ecology of the island. And so this is a way in which our tools can help decision makers make different decisions based on the impact that they will have on the climate. And so we also, then you can do comparisons. So we recently finished a project with Canada where they looked at the whole stretch from Quebec City down to Windsor, which is where about half the Canadian population lives, and looked at a series of strategies and are already now beginning to implement some of the changes that we recommend based on their carbon footprint. So this is an app that is now available, and we also are, as I said, by working with the FCCC, are taking these local plans and trying to embed this into the Paris Accord process so that it will be continually used and monitored. We also have another group of colleagues. When we started this project, we were a single team and the two teams split. So there's another team that's being led by an emeritus Harvard professor now living in London, Carl Steinitz, and he's approaching it the other way. So our idea was to give individuals, planning agencies, governments, tools that they can make decisions in their own regions, their own countries. That group is actually working at the continental scale. They're taking entire continents. They've done a study of Europe. They've done a study of South America. And their view is we're going to show countries what they need to do to make a difference in terms of climate change. So it's an extremely kind of top-down way of thinking about it. We actually think both have some value because theirs sort of says an ideal world, if everyone did the right thing, this is what we could achieve, which is not a bad benchmark. And then our tool is, okay, how far can you get to that ideal? So both of our teams are presenting out at the user conference, Esri's big conference in San Diego in 2 weeks. So a lot of this will be discussed there. We've developed a kind of simplified version. We're at an educational summit out there as well, where we're trying to get this into the hands of geography teachers, into high school teachers' hands, so that it can become a regular part of decision making. These are just some of the projects we've been doing. Harvard did a study of Puerto Rico. We've had a number of projects. China, Brazil has been very active with a number of projects in Brazil, throughout Asia as well. Now that we're working with the FCCC, we're also doing quite a bit more in the global south. So we're getting many more countries from Africa involved. And these are this is sort of what the design work looks like. And so you're basically overlaying climate actions onto maps, and our app will then assess these. So, as you can see, it ranges quite widely in terms of the scale. Sometimes an entire island like Puerto Rico down to cities like Belgrade. And there's we actually did a project in northern Minnesota, which I'll mention a little bit more about in a minute. So that's the one effort I wanted to talk about. And let me see if I think I have to now stop sharing the screen and then reshare. Any questions about that before I go on to my next one?
Is that
Yeah.
educational workshop at Esri this year like last year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in San Diego.
How
Yeah.
was the app developed? Was that like machine learning, big data, or what's the process behind like the app?
Yeah, it's an experience builder app. We actually didn't use AI in it, although we're about to start a project with Esri called the Open Plan Map, which is going to heavily use AI. And the idea here is, you may be familiar with OpenStreetMap, which is a kind of volunteer geographic information platform. This idea is that everybody's plan is going to be uploadable into a global map. AI is going to mosaic all of them together, which will allow us to see what is every single plan on the planet, and what impact. And they're going to actually, our app is going to be a portal, so that as you upload it, it's actually going to tell you your climate impact. And then it'll also enable us to compare plans based on that. So there's a whole research effort that will be part of that unfolds. So yeah, and AI is critical to making that one happen. Let's see here. Well, it showed. All right. I should probably have my colleague here, right, talk about this as much as me. We've been sort of co-conspirators in the development of, here, let me go back here. It wants me to talk fast because it's on a, okay.
You can do it.
Okay,
You can do it.
yeah, I can do it.
Go
I'll
on.
talk fast. So Biomimetics International is really an effort that Michael is leading. And the idea here is, how do we use nature as the basis for making our decisions? These two things that I just talked about may not seem like they're related, but they are, at least in my mind, which is one reason we're doing so much damage to the planet, is that we are coming at the world with the sort of assumption that we're smarter, better, more capable than the rest of the planet. And, part of the argument of biomimetics is that no, actually nature is the best engineer. Nature has pretty much figured everything out. And so the first question, whenever we make a design decision, a land planning decision, whatever, we should ask, well, how has nature already solved it, right? And so that's kind of the core idea here, is that you use the engineering of evolution as the starting point for finding solutions to human-based problems. And with that will come less damage to the planet. And what Biomimetics International is doing is really helping us this work has been going on for quite a while in university labs. We have a lot of colleagues, even at our university, who are doing biomimetic kinds of things, but there's a real challenge of getting out of the lab and to scale, to turning these into products that people can use, right? And so part of Biomimetics International is bringing together academic research and the corporate community into turning these research ideas into marketable products, systems, and strategies. So it's headquartered here, and it's again this idea of a network of networks, really linking everybody interested in working on this into this term that Michael's developed called Biosverse ecosystem. We had our first Biomimetics International Conference here last October over in Northrop, and we have our next one coming in the first week in November over at Kaufman. So all are welcome. And it was really a great conference because it brought people together who didn't know about each other, even though they're all working in this space. And so that's, I think, the really exciting part to me, is that it is this, as Michael says, a network of networks here. And as you can see, what some of the mission and goals are. I thought I would just talk briefly about some of the work that we're doing in my center that are related to this. Because I work at sort of the scale of planning. I work at scales of cities and landscapes and regions. But how does biomimetics, which has typically been focused more on products, work at that sort of larger scale? And what we do is you know, this sort of the underlying question of probably all of this, what all of this work is, I just lost that on my screen, is to, well, here, maybe I can just go with this here. Can I advance that?
It's
That'll go
really
to the
good.
end. Go to, that'll take you to the end. Go to the middle one.
Yeah, see, I lost it on my screen. Can I operate just from here or do I have to? There it went up from my screen. Isn't that weird? We've got two Zooms going here, so apologies for this. It's a little tricky because it's still showing on the screen, but I now can't see it. All right. So now I have to reshare. Okay, okay, thank you. Good. Share. Good, yeah, thanks. So, you know, one of the ways we think about the way we settle the landscape is that ecosystems, as many of you probably know, are actually organized in patches. Patch ecology is the way ecosystems work, right? Humans, we're the only animal that has organized itself globally. There's no other species that organizes itself the way we organize ourselves. And, you know, part of the argument we make is that that's why we're doing so much damage. I have another part of my work, which is actually looking at how we organize knowledge. I would argue that we're doing a lot of damage because we organize knowledge differently than the way the world is organized. The world is organized spatially. I mean, every square foot has hydrology in it, has culture in it, has, you know, you name the science and social science, it exists spatially everywhere. We organize knowledge by taking it apart and putting it in different parts of the library. And it's that taking apart of the world that I argue has made us do so much damage to the world because we're not approaching the world the way the world is organized. So great, thank you. So, so the idea here is how do we begin to, I'll just scroll up here. So how do we begin to ask, how has nature organized itself and how can that become the basis for how we, in fact, inhabit the planet? And, you know, how does biomimetics work locally? We're doing projects, we've launched 2 different projects, nonprofits that work with people experiencing homelessness. This is one of them, which is in partnership with faith communities, where it's basically the idea here is the way we're going to solve the homelessness problem is to organize this ourselves the way nature is organized, which is in diverse patch ecosystems. There can't be a large scale national solution to housing. We will never solve that problem because we're trying to solve it at the wrong scale, right? So the idea of these 2 nonprofits is we solve things extremely locally in diverse communities with a patch dynamic. In this case, we work with local faith communities. They build tiny homes. They do these in quite small groupings. This is one in St. Paul. They use the church or the synagogue or the temple as the sort of common house for them. And this has proven to be incredibly popular. We're now building these settlements not only around Minnesota, but one in Michigan, Maine is interested, California, of course. So again, it's this idea of how do we create social ecological niches and take advantage of what already exists, which is of course how nature addresses things too. Nature doesn't, you know, kind of create everything from scratch. It is constantly occupying ecological niches. And so what does it mean when humans start to do that too? Trying to make everything biodegradable. Everything is either food for something else or it's biodegradable. And so how do we start to create, in this case, these tiny homes where everything can biodegrade in it? How do we look at biomimetics regionally? This is this project we did as part of the Global Climate Project, where we asked the question of, we started with a thought experiment, which is that North America was colonized by 3 European countries, right? France, England, and Spain. So the Spanish came to basically convert and get gold. The English basically came to take the land and to kill the Native American population as much as possible, essentially eradicate it. But what interested us was the French idea, because the original French idea was that the native populations would continue to own the land and the French would simply trade. And so the thought experiment was, what if the French idea had prevailed in North America? What if, in fact, the indigenous population still controlled the land, and the white population had small trading posts where we traded with them, right? And that was, and we did this to try to see if we could, how we could maximize our carbon footprint. In other words, maximize the amount of carbon we could sequester and emissions that we could reduce. We took a slice of northern Minnesota, and this is actually the indigenous landscape. We know what Minnesota looked like prior to colonization through the great work of several of our scientists here. And so that was our basis, is how closely can we get back to that? Because that was a carbon sequestration machine. I mean, it was an incredibly powerful way of absorbing carbon. And so we basically did this with the populations up there in Minnesota. We looked at how we could minimize our agricultural footprint through intensive high-tech agriculture, how we could, in fact, minimize our settlement patterns so that instead of living across the landscape, we would live in these fairly small trading posts, how we could get rid of most of our infrastructure by simply connecting these centers with train connections and eliminate most of the infrastructure that cross the state. And then how do we maximize water and other habitat for other species? And so when we did this, we beat all the other countries, all the other universities involved in this by quite a bit. They claimed we were cheating because ours started with a thought experiment. They all started with the world as it is, and we started from the world as it could be. But nevertheless, we demonstrated that you can, enormously change your carbon footprint through sort of reimagining how we utilize the land and own the land. And then finally, what is biomimetics globally? And this was another thought experiment that began with a grad student I was working with, where some of you may be familiar with Edward Wilson's book, Half Earth, the argument being that we have to somehow preserve half the Earth for other species, or we're going to be threatened because we're so dependent on all those other species for so many of our needs to be met. And so the thought experiment is, how far can we shrink the human footprint? What would the actual human footprint need to be to sustain the global population? And some of you may be aware on the right of some of this work that, for example, at the scale of Paris, you can fit the entire world's population in 3 states. Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas, the entire human population at the scale of Paris, right? And so it began to realize, actually our footprint could be relatively small. And so what we did is we also looked at the Great Lakes basin, which has enough fresh water in it for about 3,000 years of current human consumption. That's the scale of that asset. And we also looked at food production, very intensive agriculture, energy production using wind, solar, and hydrology in this corridor. And actually, simply as a thought experiment, calculated that at the scale of Paris, so imagine a sort of a city like Paris, around the 9,500 miles of the Great Lakes shore, you can fit the entire human population in a city 8 miles wide. And so you end up with that. Less than 1% of the land area, quite a bit less than 1% of the land area fits the entire human population, with enough water for 3,000 years consumption, with enough production of calories, 2,500 calories a day for that population within that corridor, and enough energy production to basically meet current energy needs of that population. Now, this won't happen, but it was a thought experiment that we thought is important for us to realize that humans we think we have a much bigger spatial footprint than we actually need. And some of this work has now just been opened at an exhibit at the Wiseman Art Museum on future cities. So if you're interested in thinking about these things, head over to the Wiseman. It'll be up all summer. where we look at this project and a number of other efforts for us to sort of reimagine how we as humans populate the earth. And so that's a sort of another area of work that it's really great to have Michael here. We have a lot of other ideas cooking, but that gives you a sense of kind of how my center approaches biomimetics. And do I have time to even talk about the geocommunities? Okay. Yeah, the third project. I have to talk about all these things because like all the people responsible are in the room. So if I don't talk about it, I'll be in trouble. But I want to talk about it anyway here. So let me see if I can get this done here.
Can I ask one question, Tom?
Yes, yeah, do.
So have you done a thought experiment, like if somebody, let's take Lake Erie, poison Lake Erie,
Uh-huh.
in that scenario, what would you do? What's the backup?
To poison the lake?
Yeah, if somebody poisoned the lake.
Yeah, well, I mean, that, I don't know. I mean, there's enough fresh water in Lake Superior for about half of that 3,000 years is in one of the lakes. I mean, Superior is a proto-ocean.
So take
But if you want to,
Superior and try to dilute the poison.
yeah, I don't know what you would do if somebody actually, I mean, it would probably, I don't know, I have ecologist here, it would probably take quite a bit to poison a lake that size.
It'd
but-
take quite a bit to
Yeah.
blow down, you know, smoke from northern.
Yeah,
northern.
no, we haven't thought about that, Mark. We
I
haven't.
mean, they used to blow up atom bombs out of Nevada, and when it got to us, it rained down.
Well,
strong
and
now,
of
right?
course, I mean, not only is that thought experiment, is not going to happen, although we actually have looked at bodies of water in all the continents and have run scenarios about what, because Elizabeth Colbert has written about the fact that when species are threatened, they don't disperse, they actually congregate into the ecosystems that can most easily support them. And so our thought experiment is that humans, which we are an incredibly vulnerable species, we don't like to think about that, but we are one of the most vulnerable, is that where would we go? We would probably go to fresh water, right? So we've looked at what are all the big bodies of fresh water and how would populations move to them and occupy them and how much fresh water is available for that amount of time. So if we just do North America, the city is not 8 miles wide, it's only a couple miles wide. If just the entire North American continent went to the Great Lakes. And actually that was only around Superior. We didn't even need to use the other Great Lakes because Superior itself is such a resource. Now, part of this idea from E.O. Wilson is that we wouldn't permanently live this way. The idea would be to let the rest of the planet recover from us. We're the great weed species, right? And after the planet recovers, we could then begin to maybe more sensibly settle the rest of the planet again, but it'll take a while for ecosystems to recover. Yeah, and the other part of this is, of course, it throws out all of the political, divisions among us, right? I mean, it would have the entire human population living along the Great Lakes. But part of this was to also make the claim that all these divisions are ridiculous, completely ridiculous, right? And maybe that leads me to my third talk, which is about the work that Len and I are doing around geocommunities. And the notion that, is there a different way to imagine human populations on the planet other than the socio-political boundaries that we now have? And so this has been an effort that the university is funded for, Rio is funded for the next 3 years. Len has been a great partner in this work, and you can see we have 4 seed projects underway. And I won't go into a lot of the details of them, but we have 2 of them are in India. Forrest and Nida are working on 2 different projects, a forestry project and a waste recycling project in India. Edgar is working on a sort of citizen science water-related project in Guatemala, and Dingliang Yang is working up in the Leech Lake with the Leech Lake Band in northern Minnesota. So those are 4 projects. And these are just some of the slides that that Len presented at the conference in the spring, which is the idea that we really want to kind of reimagine the planet as a set of geo communities. In other words, instead of thinking about your, what country you're in, is to think about what ecosystem are you in? And how do we begin to sort of reimagine that? This is a partnership between our university and University of Buffalo and a number of the IITs in India, as well as a university called Amrita University in India. And I think both Len and Laura, were you in India? You didn't go. Yeah, so Len was there, and Kim Kirkpatrick. Kim was there, right?
Pelican got to go.
And Shashank is there. There's Shashank. And really, this idea that we have to think globally as well as locally. And so the work that we try to do in my center that I'm involved in is, what are really local projects, but how do we constantly keep this kind of global scale in mind? And so one of the things I'll just end with, one of the things that Len and I are talking about is Esri developed this World Terrestrial Ecosystems map with the USGS about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's been sitting there, I think, under-recognized and underutilized. Basically, it's 430 some ecosystems around the planet have now been mapped for really the first time. And what we're doing this summer is we're taking this map apart by layers. And so we're going to say, who do you share an ecosystem with? Who is your ecosystem community? Who's your geo community? Apart from where your political boundaries are, or even where you're located on the planet, we think that it's a way to link us together with other communities that are facing similar kind of issues. And then, of course, the research opportunities to begin to say, okay, and how do different public policies in one ecosystem affect it versus another? Right? So what are the best practices by ecosystem? Who do you share an ecosystem with? So part of this idea is building a network, a communication network across the planet based on your ecological context. So that's, again, this notion of reimagining the way in which we relate to the planet, how we settle the planet, inhabit the planet, and think about it. That's probably enough, don't you think? That's kind of, those are 3 things I wanted to talk about. Thank you for listening.